Good day and welcome back again to my little series of videos on inspiration. And I just want to talk about excuse me, in this video, teachers who've inspired me. I've talked about my own story, and I've talked about students who've inspired me, but in this video I want to talk about teachers who've inspired me. And there have been some teachers that have inspired me, not very many, I have to say. I don't mean people who can present well. Of course I know there are lots of teachers who present very well and very clearly and much better than me. There are lots of them, talking heads on YouTube. You know them all. Very good presenters, but that's not what I mean by teachers. My special interests are speaking fluency, basically. Yeah, has always been my main interest. But also test preparation and pronunciation. Those are my kind of specialities, if you like. Now, the teachers who inspired me, and I would recommend for those areas, let's start with those first. For IELTS, for example, I would recommend Liz. I've used her a lot, and I've got her link in the description below. She's very clear, and she makes really excellent videos, especially for people of lower intermediate level. Very good and above, of course. Also, I would recommend a guy called Jay, who last I knew was at Melbourne University with E2 language. In fact, I think he was one of the founding co-directors. And Jay is also very good. He makes very clear videos, and I've used them a lot in my teaching. But what's most impressive about Jay is that he's a native speaker and very highly qualified in language, and he actually took the test himself. And I think that's a very brave thing to do. It's something I haven't done. He's taken the test himself, and there's a famous story about how he took the test the first time and he only got 6.5 in his writing, and he was brave enough to write about it, and the link is in the description below. And I really admire this guy. He knows what he's doing. With regard to pronunciation, I've used, and I would recommend, a program called Tools for Clear Speech at Baruch University. This is in New York City. And this program is a self-taught program, so you can work through it yourself, but you would need a tutor or mentor to sort of guide you through it if you wanted it as well, I think. But it's very comprehensive, very good. I would also recommend Rebecca Lindquist for pronunciation. She's very good on that. Both of those links are in the descriptions below. Rebecca's main focus is on accent reduction. And also Hadar Shemesh, excellent on pronunciation. And she's got the advantage of being English is not her first language, so she's learned it from that perspective. So, very good. Now, moving on to my main interest, which is the learning of speaking fluency. I would recommend, I've used Ollie Richards, and he uses, he teaches through stories. So in fact, it's the next best thing to total immersion, which of course is the best way to learn. because you create stories, you create context, but it's still a little bit artificial, of course. But I've used it for Portuguese and I find him very good. I found his instructions were very clear, and it's very effective in improving your listening and reading comprehension. It's a structured approach, and he focuses a bit on vocabulary. I think Ollie mightn't cater to all learning styles, though. If you really like conversational type learning, then it might not suit you. He's also very expensive, no doubt about that, Ollie. One other thing about Ollie is, though, I agree with everything. Almost, he makes great videos, explains everything very well, and it's quite clear he knows what he's talking about. And he's done a lot. He's learned a lot of languages himself, so that is important. And so he's very good. Yeah, I just think he's a little bit expensive. And he does have a tendency, Ollie, to, when he's talking, he talks the talk. In other words, you know that he's leading up to another video or something he's going to sell, which is something I don't really like about the whole industry at the moment. But overall, he's very, very good. Now, the star of the show, as far as I'm concerned, and really the only teacher I would say who's really influenced me, has been Vladimir Skenderov. And Vladimir is a Bulgarian who learned English as an adult. I think he started when he was in his mid-20s. And he learned it on his own, using the internet. He did not use tutors or classes or go to college. Now, Vladimir has actually he's not just fluent in the language, he's fluent in all the 4 skills, not just speaking, but he's not just fluent, he's above a level above that. He's mastered the language. You can tell that by his command of idiom and vocabulary and grammar. It's really quite outstanding. So Vladimir has learned how to do it. His method doesn't require a lot of money, and that's a great advantage of it, unlike many of the others. He's passionate about language learning, and definitely of all the teachers I've come across, Vladimir is the most passionate. He's on a mission about how to teach, how to learn a second language. He's passionate about it. And I think sometimes he gets a little bit carried away with the passion, because he does make some rather sweeping statements. But I must say, I happen to agree with almost all of them. If not 100%, certainly partly. So what I'd like to do actually is to go through one of Vladimir's videos, which is called The Truth About Language Learning. And the link is in the description below, so you could watch it first if you liked. But I've taken a lot of his statements that he's made. They're really quite bold, as I say, sometimes sweeping statements. And a lot of them are very controversial. But I happen to agree with a lot of them. So I've kind of divided them into these statements into those I totally agree with, those I partly agree with, and those I don't agree with. So let's start with the ones I totally agree with 100%. And you will find Vladimir saying things like the role of the teacher is to teach the student how to learn alone, to become an independent learner. Well, absolutely, Vladimir, I couldn't agree with you more. That's exactly my philosophy. My job is to teach you how to become an independent learner. So it's not a good business model. And Vladimir admits that too. But I think Vladimir has been doing this probably for a bit longer, the tutoring, than I have. So he's managed to build up a huge following and to write a couple of books, or several books in fact. And I think that's where he makes his income from. So he doesn't need to teach students in order to get an income. He used to be a teacher like me, and he used to be a tutor online, but he said he gave it up. And now he's writing books and making his income that way. But yes, I agree with him. It's the same with when I'm teaching. My role is to make the student an independent learner. Not a very good business model. Unlike many of the talking heads on YouTube who have very good business models. So the second statement I totally agree with. He says the focus should be on the content. When you're learning, the language learning, that is like grammar and vocabulary, should be secondary. In other words, you start by focusing on the subject that you want to learn, and you learn it in English, you research it in English, you talk about it in English. That's how you learn. Another statement he makes is you learn English through watching interesting movies and reading interesting books. Absolutely, I agree with him 100%. You watch good movies and you read interesting books. I agree 100%. I know that in my case, most of my interesting conversations when I was learning Spanish were with my wife. Yeah, of course, what could be more interesting than that? And the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. So, in other words, this is important, that the knowledge or the content is more important. The actual language is secondary importance. Another statement he makes is you need to figure out your own compelling content. Teacher can't do this for you. I agree with you. I can't tell you what you're interested in. What is compelling interest for you? You have to decide what that is. A teacher can't decide it. Now, this is, of course, totally the opposite to the way language colleges work, where they decide everything and you decide nothing. So you can see he's quite revolutionary in his approach to the learning of language. Vladimir says language is a tool for getting knowledge. It's not a tool for communication. People keep saying language is a tool for communication. I agree with him on this. It's not. It is a tool for getting knowledge. If you want knowledge about a certain topic, then and that language, then you need to get that knowledge in the language that you want to learn. For example, let's say I want to learn about ChatGPT. Well, what I'll do is I'll say I want to speak about ChatGPT in English. I don't say I want to learn English. No, I want to learn about ChatGPT through English. That's how I learn the English. So content first. So you follow the topics, he says, not the language teachers. You follow topics. So he's totally against this idea of subscribing to talking heads on YouTube. And actually, he in his own video, he says, please don't subscribe to me. I've never heard that before. I agree with him entirely. You don't learn the language by following a series of random topics about language learning, following a teacher. No, you follow the topic. If it's ChatGPT, you keep learning about ChatGPT until you've learned about it. In English, of course. So he says, yes, the focus is on knowledge. And entertainment is a type of knowledge. I think knowledge here, the definition of knowledge is very broad. It can include entertainment. Now there are some topics then, some statements that he makes in this video, which I will agree with mostly, if not 100%. He says, no one has ever learned a foreign language by watching YouTube videos of people calling themselves language teachers. And that's, again, what I was referring to. You don't just subscribe to a language teacher and follow this talking head on YouTube. I do agree with him. And you can waste your time. You can become distracted from your topic by the teacher. Don't subscribe and become a passive learner. Be active, he says. Yes, I agree. Then he goes on to say, foreign language learning as a separate subject should not exist. Now that's pretty revolutionary. And I know what he's getting at. He's saying that when you go into a language classroom to learn English, you're not actually learning any knowledge, any topic at all. You're just learning vocabulary and grammar, which is not knowledge as he defines it. I agree with him. Then he is even more controversial is language schools should not exist. Wow, he knows how to make himself unpopular. Of course, he's not afraid to make himself unpopular, Vladimir. He has built up a big following. But you can see the logic there from where he's going with all this. And finally, language is not teachable. Right. Some aspects of it are. Now, I would say some aspects of it are. Such as, I think, pronunciation and the taking of tests, for example. But by and large, he's saying language is not teachable. You have to learn it. Now, there are a few statements in here which I'm not quite sure about in this video. And one is this thing where he talks about language is knowledge and knowledge is language. This is not quite clear to me. And I remember Einstein, I quote Einstein here, if you can't explain what you mean to a 6-year-old, then you don't understand it yourself. So I actually don't quite know what he's talking about here. So I just wonder, does he know about it? To me, it's not quite clear anyway. Also, he talks about polyglots. And he says basically polyglots don't exist. Well, I suppose it depends on what you mean by a polyglot. I think his definition of fluency and mastery is really quite strict. He's not just talking about speaking, he's talking about writing. I mean, how many people can write at a fast speed in their second language? Very few. So he says no, polyglots don't really exist. Now, he does, as I say, tend to make, Vladimir, rather sweeping statements. And I think there are one or two statements that he makes that I definitely do disagree with. One of them is this: any teacher who promises to teach you TOEFL English is delusional or lying. I disagree. I do think you can prepare students for tests. There's a certain way you can teach TOEFL. I've been teaching IELTS English, and I think I can promise you to do that. And I don't think I'm delusional or lying. He really has a go at the talking heads on YouTube, and he's very critical of them and of these platforms that encourage people to pay money just to chat in English, like Cambly and italki and Lingoda. He says they're all a waste of money and time. Well, I think that they may not be very good value for money, is the way I would put it. But I do think that for absolute beginners, you do need to have get a certain minimum level of confidence, and you can do that by paying to talk to people on these platforms. However, you can do it for free by doing it on platforms like Conversation Exchange. So I agree. Now, anyway, I think the great thing about Vladimir is his passion, and he's done it. He is a master, and that's exactly what you need to do, is to find someone who's done it. He has been accused of being, as I said, making sweeping statements and a little bit overly aggressive, perhaps, with some of the teachers on these platforms who he likes to interview. So, yeah, he can be a little bit mean to them, I think, at times. But he's a wonderful inspiration for me, and a very passionate learner. I think perhaps, like all people who are truly idealistic and passionate, he doesn't quite see that not everybody is like him, and we don't all have the time, really, and that's the issue. We don't all have the time just to be quite so dedicated and passionate as Vladimir undoubtedly is. Anyway, if you have enjoyed this video, I really encourage you to like and share it, please. I'll be back with more. Please leave your comments on this video. If you want to contact me, you'll find my address in the description below.